The specific details of the national security law have yet to be fleshed out, but there is already public outcry and international reaction against it. Is opposition to the new law justified, or is it an overreaction?
Certainly not justified to criticize or attack this act of introducing legislation to enhance and improve safeguarding national security in Hong Kong, because every country in the world needs national security legislation. So why should Hong Kong be an exception? Hong Kong is an inalienable part of the People's Republic of China. So I would say that to sort of jump into a conclusion that any such national security legislation is not going to be good, is going to take away Hong Kong's freedom, are totally unsubstantiated. And what's more, although the fact that the National People's Congress has chosen a two-step approach, so step one is to pass a decision to authorize the National People's Congress Standing Committee to prepare and enact the legislation, and then step two, they will prepare the legislation. We are not yet in the stage of having the draft legislation in front of us. But if one cares to look at the explanatory statement to the decision, it has been made very clear in that explanatory statement that the National People's Congress Standing Committee, in preparing the national security legislation, has to follow 5 very important principles. And I don't think anybody could argue against those principles. Those principles is, one is to uphold one country, two systems. Secondly is to safeguard national security. And third is, which is a very important one, is to uphold all the rights and freedoms enjoyed by the Hong Kong people. And there was a further elaboration to say that the enactment of a national security legislation is not going to change, I repeat, it's not going to change the high degree of autonomy enjoyed by the Hong Kong SAR, including it's not going to have any impact or change the independence of the judiciary, including final adjudication in Hong Kong. So with all those assurances, I hope that if people still have concern, right, they have not seen the legislation, they still have concern, but at least they should calm down and wait for the draft legislation instead of rushing into all this rhetorical criticisms and high-sounding attacks on our country and also on Hong Kong SAR government.
Fear of the unknown is what is driving locals and foreigners to react negatively to the new security law. Between now and when the actual details of the law come out, how will you allay this fear and assure residents and investors of Hong Kong SAR's continued autonomy?
Well, Hong Kong has gone through that phases of fear previously. I still remember when I was younger in the government in preparing for the 1997 sort of transfer of sovereignty, people also had fear. People also alleged that Hong Kong would die, but all these things have not happened. So my response is look at it objectively. First of all, every country has to respect and accept that another country has to enact legislation on national security for application in every part of the country. So why should Hong Kong be an exception without that sort of legislative protection? Secondly is look at the assurances and the guarantees given by the central authorities over these years under the Basic Law. Hong Kong's rights and freedoms have been enshrined. Hong Kong's stability and prosperity have been growing in the last 30 years. If you mention this word fear, I told you the greatest fear that many of us have in the last year was a fear of violence. Was a fear that we don't know whether we could still say something that some of those rioters dislike, and hence they will intimidate us on the social media, or they will even physically torture some of these people. This is the greatest fear in many of the minds and hearts of Hong Kong people. And this is exactly why the central authorities could not turn a blind eye to this situation in Hong Kong and must act. And once the central government has made up its mind to act, I am quite certain that it's very decisive. So we are not going to be frightened by threats of this and that. We will continue to do what is right for Hong Kong and for the country.